Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. Today we're going to be talking about the Totally Normal event, which in actuality is a hidden event that you've got to jump through some hoops to get. If you don't know what I'm talking about, be sure to check out my Patreon page, where I not only give you all the clue solutions that you're going to need to unlock this, but also have my thoughts on the decks and some play footage of those decks in play to help you make your decision about what deck you want to play. More specifically, today in this video, we're going to be talking about what I think is the most budget-friendly of the showcase decks from the Totally Normal event, and how to make it even more budget-friendly for your Brawl needs. But before we get into all that, just a quick reminder that the Stronghold is producing content for you across a number of platforms. And Patreon has recently introduced an option where you can follow our content there without the need for any financial commitment. So even if you aren't ready to support the Stronghold is better positioned to support you. So you never miss out on a thing. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. All right, so let's take a few minutes to go over the deck, do a quick deck check on it. As I said, this is extremely budget friendly. And, well, I've pretty much organized the deck here according to budget friendliness. Obviously, the commander and namesake is Gix Yawgmoth Praetor. 3 mana, 3/3. I'm sure everyone is familiar with this card because it came to us as part of our 2024 budget year starter decks. So this mythic, literally everyone has. You don't have to spend a dime on this. The majority of the mana base on this, likewise, is very, very cheap. 35 swamps. Of course, put any swamp you like. But in the deck list, I use the swamp from the starters just so everyone will autofill that, no problem at all. The first real column here, and really, as you see, the largest column overall, these are all cards that I think everyone should feel very comfortable spending or having spent a wild card to have in their collection, particularly for Brawl. Mishra's Bauble is basically like lowering this down to 99 cards instead of 100. Plaza of Heroes is a card available in Standard, but I think it should pretty much go in every Brawl or Standard Brawl deck that you're building right now because of its effects on legendary creatures. Wayfarer's Bauble is basically a land card. Basically. Arcane Signet, everyone has a copy of this, and while this is a monocolored deck, it will still produce black mana for you and allows you to ramp. Cold Steel Heart is just straight up ramp. Guardian Idol, more ramp, and a post-wrath creature if you need it. Limbus is a life gain card, also allows you to draw a card, and Scry, which is almost like drawing 2 cards. And it returns back to your library to give you a certain inevitability option. Mazemind Tome is a great card draw option. It is a rare wild card, but again, I think everybody should have one of these for their Brawl collection at the minimum. For just 2 mana, allows you to functionally draw 3 cards and then gain 4 life. Mazemind Stone is another ramp piece and then lets you draw a card in the late game when maybe you don't need the ramp anymore. Ornithopter of Paradise obviously is a mana fixer, but in this deck, because it's mono black, we don't really need it for that. So it is a potential blocker and a flyer on that, although offensively, obviously, it doesn't do very much. But I think most importantly here, it allows you to ramp. Reckoner Bankbuster is another great card draw option at 2 mana, colorless, goes in like every single Brawl deck you'll ever build. And it's a 4/4 beat stick when you need it to be, so that's kind of a nice option as well. And then Bloodline Pretender, of course, is a changeling, so it fits into every single one of your tribal decks. This deck, of course, is a bit of a demon tribal, But when you play Bloodline Pretender, you are probably going to want to name either human or cleric. We'll see why in a minute if you're not familiar with this deck already. From here, we've got 5 cards easily available to you from Standard. In fact, most of them were part of the new player experience starter decks, either for 2024 and or 2023. Corrupted Conviction allows you to draw cards at the cost of sacrificing a creature. Go for the Throat is just straight up removal. Undead Butler is kind of recursion, so if you have a key card, go to the graveyard, you can always get it back. Overwhelming Remorse allows you to exile a creature, and more importantly, or a planeswalker. Good stuff. And then Dreadhound is not only a demon that you can tutor up in this deck, but is also an uncommon from last year's starter decks to 2023 budget year. And whenever a creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from a library, each opponent loses 1 life. So if you're kind of swarming the board and they're having to just kill things off in mass, this has a pretty nice effect. Next up, we've got the cards that are higher rarities, but again, come to you from Standard. Phyrexian Arena, for instance, is in the 2024 starter collection. Mirror Box is fantastic for this. We'll see some great tribality things. We've got a lot of legendary creatures in here as well. And does some cool things, and it was part of the 2023 starter deck, so certainly a lot of folks out there are going to have this. Pylon is a convocable removal spell that again destroys creatures or planeswalkers, also allows you to destroy, surveil 2, and was part of this year's budget starter collection. Archfiend of the Dross is not part of any of those starter decks or anything like that. But a 4-mana 6/6 flyer, even though it has some drawbacks, is pretty darn strong and not something that is hard to come by in this standard environment. I think a lot of players will have at least the 1 copy. Similar, Defiler of Flesh. Helm of the Host, I have in here as the mythic version because it was available in Pacts of Brothers War. But if you don't want to wait to open one, or if you are looking to craft this, be aware there is a rare version of Helm of the Coast that you should craft instead. Gix's Command from this year's starters. Invoke Despair was banned last summer, so there's going to be hopefully a lot of people that have this card in their collection. They picked it up for free at the banning announcement. Really strong card. If you don't have it, it might be worth a craft. It might not. That's up to you. Dreadfast Demon, another one from Standard. I love the fact that for 7 mana and 6/6 flying stats on this, it basically gives you another one every single end step. It's kind of unstoppable. Now, the card that really makes this deck go is the Shadowborn Apostle. As you can see, this deck can have any number of cards named Shadowborn Apostle. It's a common, and while it is holding up 32 slots, yes, 1 out of 3 cards in this deck is basically a Shadowborn Apostle. Like all other any number of cards out there, once you have 4, you can add as many copies to your deck as you want. So we're talking about 4 common wild cards here to fill approximately 1/3 of the deck. Really solid budget investment. And of course, this style of deck can go with almost any black-based legendary commander for years to come. Moving down through this list, Deadly Dispute is a common, probably the sort of thing that anyone should have in their collection, particularly for Brawl. It's a great way to spend a common wild card. Xander's Wake is the only alchemy-based card in this. Again, an uncommon, and it gives you access to so many other cards through its spellbook capability. If you don't like that style of alchemy card, by all means, you can certainly skip this and just increase your apostles very easily by 1. But this adds a lot of value to your collection in a single craft of an uncommon. Call of the Death Dwellers. This is kind of like the signature piece for uncommons that return creatures. In fact, this one can return multiples from the graveyard to the battlefield, so it skips your hands altogether, and it also picks up a menace counter on one or both of them. Very, very cool. The only rare in this wild card required grouping is Tobruk's Hope's Demise. Of course, this is part of your demon package that you can summon, tutor up off of Shadowborn Apostle. This one also has some cleric synergy, which, if you notice, apostles are clerics, which is why I think it's worth the rare wild card here. It has lifelink as long as it has 5 or more counters on it. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, put a +1 counter on Tobruk's. If that creature was a cleric, you may draw a card if you do lose a life. So just so much value and synergy going on here. Very, very nice. Drag to the Underworld is one of those great devotion to black cards, destroy target creature, and this is basically a destroy that you are going to be able to cast for 2 black pretty much anytime you want. And of course, last up, an uncommon, Archfiend of Sorrows, 7 mana, 4/5. The reason this is in here, and I think it's worth an uncommon for this deck, is when it ETBs, creatures your opponents control get -2/2 until end of turn. And of course, it has an unearth ability, so you can even do it again from the graveyard just to really sort of semi-wipe your opponent's board or really weaken them for an approaching combat sequence. All in all, a very cheap deck. I think we're talking 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 real wild cards here specifically for this deck. Again, there might be some others if you're early in your Brawl journey that you end up spending. But I'm not really counting these because I think everyone should have these, not just for this deck, but for many, many decks to come. So what was that? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 wild cards for this deck. Really, really super good to go from a standard Brawl to a Brawl deck, basically for 10 wild cards, is really phenomenal and something that I think everyone should consider. And hey, if you're just now hearing about this event for the first time, or maybe you don't have all the clues, you've still got about 24 hours from the time of publishing to complete this event, and I have shortcutted all the clues and answers and everything that you need to know over on the totally free part of my Patreon, along with a lot of other related content, including my thoughts on the deck's budget friendliness, as well as nearly 3 hours of play footage if you're trying to decide what deck you want to play in very short order. So be sure to check that out if you need a little help in the event. And before we go, I want to take just a moment to thank my totally awesome patrons for supporting me and allowing me to apply my passion into a community. And of course, before we go, I've got some suggestions for your next step.